It was a rainy afternoon when I stumbled upon that shop. I hadn't planned on entering the old, dilapidated antique store, but something drew me in like a magnet. My daughter had been asking for a new doll, one more elegant than the plastic toys she typically played with. As I stepped into the dark, musty shop, the smell of old wood, dust, and mothballs overwhelmed me, but I pushed through. The door creaked shut behind me with an eerie finality. The store was silent, save for the faint drips of rain against the window panes. Dim light filtered through cracked glass, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally across the cluttered shelves. There were piles of forgotten treasures everywhere. Old furniture, tarnished silverware, dusty paintings, and strange trinkets that seemed to whisper their own histories. But my eyes were immediately drawn to a display in the back corner, a collection of porcelain dolls lined up on a shelf. They sat there so still, so lifelike, their delicate faces frozen in time. One doll in particular caught my attention, a beautiful porcelain figure with jet black eyes. Her features were so perfectly sculpted. She seemed almost real. She wore an antique lace dress, yellow with age, and her hair, though a bit frizzy from the years, still cascaded down her back in soft curls. It was as if she was waiting for someone to take her home. I picked up the doll, feeling its cool surface beneath my fingers. It had an old-world charm, yet something about it unsettled me. Still, I thought it would be the perfect gift for Emily, my little girl. I turned to the counter, where a strange man was standing, observing me with a curious, almost unnerving gaze. He was tall, gaunt, with sharp features and a weathered face that looked as though it had seen things most people would never want to imagine. His dark eyes seemed to pierce through me as I approached. A thin smile curled on his lips as he looked at the doll in my hands. "Ah," he said softly, his voice raspy. "You found the last one." I paused, holding the doll in front of me, its glassy eyes staring back at me. "The last one?" I echoed, confused. There were so many dolls on the shelf. Why would this one be special? "The last doll from my grandmother's collection," the man explained, his grin widening just a fraction. "She was quite the collector, you see. She gathered them all her life. They say these dolls bring things to those who own them." I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but I dismissed it as just a damp cold of the shop. "How much is it?" I asked, hoping the price wasn't too steep. To my surprise, the price was extremely low, almost suspiciously so. I felt a flicker of hesitation, but the man quickly assured me it was the best deal I would find. "A bargain for sure," he said with a glimmer of something strange in his eyes. I paid, eager to leave the musty shop, though the man's unsettling presence lingered in my mind. As I left, he called out, his voice echoing in the gloom, "You should have never taken her home." The words lingered in my mind as I made my way home, but I pushed them aside. I was just being paranoid. After all, it was just an old doll. What harm could it possibly do? Later that evening, I placed the doll in my daughter's room, beside her bed. Emily was thrilled with the new addition to her collection of stuffed animals and toys. "She's so pretty, Mommy," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement as she inspected the doll from head to toe. I kissed her goodnight, tucking her under the covers. I couldn't help but notice how eerily still the doll seemed, perched on the edge of the bed, with its dark eyes staring unblinking at the ceiling. But I shrugged it off and closed the door, leaving her room bathed in the soft light from the hallway. The night passed uneventfully, or so I thought. Around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a loud noise. I sat up, heart pounding in my chest, and listened. There was no sound, but the air in the room felt wrong. My eyes darted to the clock. It was still early. Emily hadn't stirred yet. But then I heard it, soft, slow footsteps in the hallway. I held my breath, trying to listen. A soft whisper broke the silence. A voice, small and indistinct, like a child's murmur. I rushed to Emily's room, panic tightening my chest. The door creaked open, and there she was, standing in the middle of the room, her eyes wide with terror. She was staring at the doll. "Mommy," she whispered, voice trembling. She talked to me. The doll whispered my name. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. That was impossible. I picked Emily up, holding her close, and stared at the doll, now sitting crookedly on the edge of the bed. Its eyes were fixed on me, somehow more intense, more malevolent. My heart raced as I backed out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I spent hours researching the doll, frantic to understand what had happened. What I found made my blood run cold. This wasn't just any doll. It was part of a cursed collection, a collection of objects that had been tied to a series of tragic events and deaths. The woman who had originally owned them was said to have died under mysterious, violent circumstances. The doll, like the others, was rumored to carry her vengeful spirit. The man's words echoed in my mind once more. You should have never taken her home. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Doors slammed shut by themselves. The lights flickered, dimming to a sickly hue. A constant, low whisper filled the house, as if voices were speaking just out of earshot. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. The presence in the house was growing stronger, more malevolent. One night, as I passed by Emily's room, I froze in my tracks. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see the doll, sitting at the foot of Emily's bed, its eyes fixed on me. Its expression had changed. The once serene face was now twisted, its smile grotesque and cruel. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to destroy it. In a blind panic, I grabbed the doll and tossed it into the fireplace, hoping that fire would be the end of it. I watched, trembling, as the flames licked at the porcelain, waiting for the doll to burn. But it didn't. The fire flickered around it, growing brighter, hotter, and the doll only seemed to grow larger, its features becoming even more grotesque. Its once innocent face was now cracked and distorted, the smile twisted into something demonic. I screamed as the doll grew, its form growing and expanding, its eyes now glowing with an unholy light. I tried to run, but the doors slammed shut, trapping me in the house with it. I could hear the doll's whispers now, louder and more insistent, as if mocking my futile attempts to escape. The doll was never destroyed. It followed us, a constant, horrifying presence in our home. No matter what I did, no matter how far I moved, how many times I tried to burn it or bury it, it returned, its malicious presence growing stronger with each passing day. And the worst part? It was always watching, always waiting, as if it had chosen us for its own twisted amusement. It never let us forget that antique store, that man with his unsettling grin. Now they were just a distant memory, but the curse, the doll, and the horror it brought with it were forever etched into our lives. It was just past midnight when I took my first late-night shift at the old antique store. The place was tucked in the heart of town, so old that its creaky floors and dusty shelves almost seemed like they had stories of their own to tell. The sign outside, Elderwood Curiosities, was faded, barely visible in the dim light. Most people avoided it, not out of any particular knowledge of the store's history, but simply because it exuded an eerie aura. The locals whispered about it, speaking in hushed tones of the dolls, old, rare, and unsettling. The kinds of dolls no one should keep in their house. It was said that the dolls weren't just objects. They carried the spirits of children who had once loved them and were now trapped within their porcelain faces. My manager, Mr. Jensen, had a habit of disappearing for long stretches during late shifts. So, when he asked me to cover, I didn't think much of it. I was new in town and needed the money. I hadn't heard all the stories, and even if I had, I likely would have shrugged them off as just that, stories. Just make sure you inventory the new dolls, Mr. Jensen had instructed me before leaving. We've had a strange donation, and I don't want anything misplaced. The donors were particular about the condition. Sure thing, I replied, glancing around the cluttered store. The dim light filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows over shelves crammed with all sorts of strange trinkets. But it was the dolls that caught my eye. They were everywhere. Porcelain figures dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their eyes wide and glassy, staring with an unsettling stillness. Some were posed in glass cases, while others sat on wooden shelves, their expressions frozen in time. I pulled up the inventory list on my phone and started going through the stock, but it didn't take long for the first strange thing to happen. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Footsteps. Soft, slow, echoing through the aisles. But when I looked up, the store was empty. I shook my head, trying to brush off the chill creeping up my spine. It's just an old building, I told myself. The kind of creaks and groans that happen when the wind blows through cracks in the walls. I continued with my task, restocking the shelves with the newly donated dolls, carefully arranging them as best I could. Some had cracked faces. Others were missing limbs, but none were as unsettling as a doll that seemed to keep drawing my attention. It was a small, lifelike figure. Its clothes were a faded blue dress, the fabric frayed at the edges, but the doll's face, it was different from the others. Its eyes were unervingly real, the kind of eyes that seemed to follow you, no matter where you stood in the room. There was something almost alive about it. I shivered and moved to place it on the shelf. That's when I heard the whispering. At first, it was faint, a rustling sound that could have been the wind. But then the voices grew louder, whispers like soft, childish murmurs, though I couldn't make out any distinct words. I froze, my hand hovering over the doll's head. Then the footsteps. Closer now. I turned around slowly, half expecting to see Mr. Jensen return early or maybe a customer browsing the shelves. But there was no one, no movement, no sign of life except for the shadows creeping along the walls. Then I saw him. He was standing near the back of the store, just behind a display of dolls. He was tall, dressed in black from head to toe. His face was pale, almost sickly, with eyes that looked impossibly dark, darker than the night itself. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. I was frozen. Something about his presence felt wrong. The hairs on my arms stood on end, and my heart began to race. The whispers grew louder, almost drowning out the sound of my own breath. And then, as if he'd heard my thoughts, his gaze shifted, locking with mine. It was an unnatural chill that washed over me, as if he could see into the very depths of my soul. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs wouldn't move. Before I could blink, he was gone. Just like that, vanished into thin air. But there was something left in his place. The doll, the one with the faded blue dress, was now sitting directly in front of me, positioned perfectly as though it had been placed there deliberately. Its lifelike eyes still stared at me, but now they seemed to gleam with something far more sinister. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't normal. The store wasn't normal. There was something deeply wrong about this place. I quickly reached for my phone and called Mr. Jensen. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to dial the number twice before I managed to get through. Mr. Jensen? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I think something's wrong. I saw someone. He was watching me from behind the dolls. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Mr. Jensen's voice, low and urgent, responded. Sarah, you need to leave. Don't touch anything. I'm coming back right now. But the doll, I began, but the line went dead. I looked back at the doll, now positioned perfectly facing the door. It hadn't moved since I called, but there was something unnervingly deliberate about the way it sat, its head tilted ever so slightly, as if it were observing me. I could still hear the whispers in my mind, and the air in the store felt thick, suffocating. The store door suddenly creaked open, and I turned, expecting to see Mr. Jensen. But instead, it was a man in black again. He stepped into the store, his presence as heavy as ever, and slowly he spoke. I am the spirit of a child, he said, his voice cold and distant. I died with my beloved doll in my arms. Now it is bound to me and I to it. You must never move that doll or try to sell it. If you do, there will be consequences. I felt a surge of fear grip me, and before I could respond, the man was gone again, leaving behind an oppressive silence that was shattered only by the quiet hum of the old lights above me. I wanted to flee, to run as far as I could, but something held me back. The fear that had seized me was too great, too consuming. The dolls on the shelves seemed to shift, their glass eyes gleaming in the dim light, as I took a hesitant step toward the door. As soon as I opened it, the wind howled to the streets outside, and I turned back, watching in horror as the dolls in the windows began to move. Their heads slowly turned, their tiny hands shifted, and for a brief, terrifying moment, they seemed alive. The man's voice echoed in my mind as I stepped into the night. don't return. I didn't. The next day, the store was empty. Not a soul in sight. The dolls remained, staring silently from the windows, their eyes locked on anyone who passed by. The store was abandoned, forgotten, and I prayed it would stay that way.